It's 7:55 a.m. on a quiet Sunday in Hawaii. Dozens of American battleships sit peacefully at anchor. A moment later, the morning is shattered as the water reflects a swarm of incoming aircraft. By 1941, the Empire of Japan was rapidly modernizing its military, but it faced a crippling geographic reality. The island nation lacked the coal, iron, and petroleum required to power an industrial war machine. To feed its factories and fleet, Tokyo launched a relentless campaign of territorial expansion. Japanese forces pushed into Manchuria, initiated a full invasion of China, and occupied French Indochina to extract vital raw materials. This regional aggression deepened into a global threat in 1940. Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, formally aligning its military with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Driven by the immediate need for resources and emboldened by its new Axis partners, the Japanese Empire continued its expansion southward, putting it on an unavoidable collision course with the United States. President Franklin Roosevelt responded to the occupation of Indochina with swift economic retaliation. Washington froze all Japanese financial assets in the United States and enacted a total ban on the export of scrap iron. The Imperial Japanese Navy imported roughly 80% of its oil from the United States. Extending the embargo to include petroleum severed that supply entirely, leaving Japan with a fuel reserve that would run dry in just 18 to 24 months. The diplomatic breaking point arrived on November 26, 1941, with the whole note. The United States delivered a strict ultimatum, demanding Japan completely withdraw all military forces from China and Indochina in exchange for lifting the embargo. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo faced a stark strategic dilemma. Accepting the American demands meant abandoning decades of expansion and accepting national humiliation. The alternative was to launch a military strike southward to capture the oil-rich Dutch East Indies by force. The American embargo was designed to deter Japanese aggression without firing a shot. Instead, the total restriction of fuel forced Tokyo's hand, turning a regional border dispute into the trigger for a preemptive Pacific War. Knowing Japan could not win a protracted attritional war against American industry, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto formulated a highly unorthodox operational plan. He proposed a preemptive knockout blow aimed directly at the U.S. Pacific Fleet, anchored in Hawaii. But the geography of Pearl Harbor presented a massive physical barrier. The harbor had an average depth of just 40 feet. Standard aerial torpedoes of the era plunged much deeper upon water entry, meaning they would bury themselves directly into the harbor mud before they could level out and strike a ship. Here's the solution. Standard torpedoes dive into the mud. Engineers modified the Type 91 torpedo with large wooden fins that stabilized the drop, then shattered on impact. Simultaneously, anti-roll flippers engaged, forcing the nose up and preventing it sinking past 33 feet. By solving the physics of a shallow water drop, Japanese engineers removed the final operational barrier, allowing Yamamoto's seemingly impossible surprise attack to become a devastating reality. The first warning signs were missed entirely. At 7:02 a.m., operators at the Opana radar station on Oahu's northern shore detected a massive swarm of aircraft approaching. Assuming it was a scheduled flight of American B-17s, a junior officer told them to disregard the readings. Less than an hour later, the reality materialized through the clouds. Japanese pilots dove toward the harbor, greeted only by late, sporadic black flak. The first assault wave consisted of 183 dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and Zero fighters. They swarmed the island, concentrating their heaviest payloads directly on the battleships moored tightly together along Battleship Row. At 8:54 a.m., a second wave of 170 aircraft arrived over the burning harbor. Their strict orders were to eliminate any remaining active battleships and destroy the secondary dry dock facilities. By leveraging absolute surprise and deploying a massive, concentrated force of naval aviation, the Japanese strike force successfully paralyzed the core of the U.S. Pacific Fleet before it could organize a unified defense. On the ground, the situation was chaotic. Sailors ran through thick smoke and raining shrapnel, desperately trying to manually load anti-aircraft guns, while explosions tore through the steel hulls of their ships. Amidst the destruction, the USS Nevada was the only battleship to build enough steam to get underway. Realizing that the dive bombers were trying to sink her in the narrow harbor exit, her commander intentionally ran the burning ship aground to keep the vital channel open to the sea. The attack heavily targeted maintenance infrastructure, turning immobilized ships into massive static targets. The flagship, USS Pennsylvania, was boxed into a dry dock. Bombs struck, igniting fuel tanks of 2 destroyers parked ahead of her, the Cassin and Downs, gutting them in a massive fire. The devastation inside the dry docks proved that no ship, whether moving, moored, or propped up for repairs, could survive a coordinated strike from above. The following day, President Roosevelt addressed Congress, famously labeling it a date which will live in infamy. The attack prompted an immediate shift in Washington, ending years of debate over whether the United States should join the war. Congress immediately declared war on Japan. Days later, Germany and Italy honored their tripartite pact by declaring war on the United States, irrevocably linking the Pacific and European theaters into one massive global conflict. The immediate tactical results heavily favored Tokyo. Over 2,400 Americans were killed, and 21 ships were sunk or damaged. In return, the Japanese strike force lost just 29 aircraft and fewer than 70 men. But this map reveals a critical error in Japanese execution. Fearing American counterattacks, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo refused to launch a third wave. He left Oahu's massive oil storage tanks and extensive naval repair facilities completely intact. By prioritizing the destruction of prestige ships over the base's functional infrastructure, the Japanese military left the United States with the exact industrial capacity it needed to salvage the fleet and wage a retaliatory war. The destruction of Battleship Row inadvertently modernized the U.S. Navy. With the dreadnoughts out of commission, American strategy shifted entirely to the aircraft carriers, ships that had been out at sea during the attack and survived untouched. The psychological impact on the nation was profound. For nearly 60 years, Pearl Harbor stood as the deadliest foreign attack on American soil, maintaining a heavy presence in the national memory. Today, over 1,000 sailors remain entombed within the sunken hull of the USS Arizona. Decades later, dark droplets of oil continuously surface from the wreckage, referred to by many as the tears of the Arizona. Tokyo sought to secure its empire by crippling the American fleet, but by executing a surprise attack, they unified a fractured American public and awakened an industrial and military juggernaut that would ultimately ensure their defeat.